Hello and welcome to a presentation and a demonstration of GreenLight. This software, GreenLight from Circular Software, has been purchased by Quarto, and this presentation has been prepared for everyone working with Quarto, either in-house or out-of-house as freelancers or suppliers, etc. So let's get started. Who am I? I'm Ken Jones. I have quite a lot of experience working with illustrated publishers. I used to work at a printers and a software company, and then I moved to become the sort of in-house publishing software trainer at Penguin. I was doing that for over 5 years, and then for a couple of years I was the technical production manager, handling how files were supplied to print suppliers and the requirements and pre-flighting, etc. for that. And then I moved into creating scripts, automation and software. So that's my background. I'm really interested in illustrated publishers, and Circular Software is my company to create Mac applications, custom software. We do training and consultancy and services for publishing customers, as I say. We have a few different applications. Some are to do with creating beautiful fixed layout ebooks. Master plan is to help create and also publish illustrated publishing online. But GreenLight is what we're talking about today. So GreenLight is all about whilst you're working on your files and all the files that are in your workflow, and it's a way to sort of check that everything is complete, correct and consistent. So it gives you confidence that the files that you receive or the files that you send are in a good shape. And we'll see more of what can happen when we get to having files in a good shape. It really helps with sort of exporting or preparing files for translation, that sort of thing. So how do we get to have consistent files? It's not easy. These are sort of the steps that are required. First of all, you need to have sort of a coming together of all the parts of a large business like Quarto to find out what different offices in different regions and different imprints within the same office perhaps maybe have different recommendations or different guidelines. So having a look at all of those and pulling them together into a new document. So that was done, and once that's done, that's a start. It's a good start. But then publishing that somewhere, letting people know where that is, asking people to read it, and then hoping that everyone understands it. That is sort of where most companies get to eventually, but that's sort of where it stops. That's sort of the best that's possible. But this is what GreenLight is actually taking further and helping actually make sure that people actually are reading and understanding the guidelines of what's required. It helps notify people if anything has changed, and also for any new starters they can quickly get up to speed. So it's a tricky thing. So we've started, and Circular Software has helped Quarto decide what is required and to document what is required. So let's have a look at that. This document is available publicly online at this web address. Let's go and have a look at it online actually. And it's good that it's online, because an online resource like this is, of course you can print it out or download it and save it somewhere, but if you do go to this online place, then it's the very latest information, isn't it? So as things change, as they inevitably will, we have this central location where people can come for the latest information. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick look. I'm not going to read it all out, but standard software, nothing much different there in terms of you're using InDesign and Photoshop and Illustrator, and production may use Acrobat Pro also. So it's regular sort of stuff. Where this might be a change is that it's fine to use CMYK for computer generated images, vectors for example, but if you're commissioning photos or purchasing stock photography, then RGB is a preferred way to work with color. So RGB images, they're smaller in file size, but they have more colors available within them. They're much more flexible for moving to different types of print or other output, and having them in excuse me, having them in as an RGB file means that they're easier for the software to generate the right sort of output at the time that it's required. So one of the requirements here is that the recommendation is to use RGB images. File naming is another important, if slightly boring, subject, but this is how we've summed up the file naming for everyone within the Quarto group and everyone working within Quarto or with Quarto to use. So let's have a look at this. First of all, we're using any letter or number. We can use dashes and underscores, but that's it. So we're not using spaces. We're using dashes to indicate where there's a page range, or spaces, to replace spaces in document names. So let's go from the start. The book code, which can have a dash in as well. The book code, some teams always use book code. Some teams this is quite new to have a book code, but we're going to identify every document with the book code, and that's the first thing that's in the file name. Then we're going to have an underscore, and an underscore separates the parts of the file name. So the different parts of the file name are the only things that are separated with an underscore. So then we have what's called a section identifier. So the section of the document, most of the document is the internal section. So that's where all the the pages of the book are created. But then there's different types of cover, obviously, which we can identify, and end papers and prelims, and translation files are more like a file that goes out for translation at the end of a job. If you are using the internal, then internal sections have the page range. So the page range, if I go to the next page, is actually mentioned here as well. So we have all page numbers in file names have 3 digits. So we're going from, if it's page 1, it's actually 001, and then there's a dash to the end page. So then the naming of files helps GreenLight decide what should be checked, and it also helps with the output, the exporting that GreenLight can do. So it's very important to have our file naming in good order. The document name, this is sort of an area that you can just use a brief description. If there's multiple sections on a longer book, this might be the chapter or a description of what the internal section is all about. The document name isn't really sort of strictly checked or anything. It's just as long as you have letters, numbers, dashes, no spaces, you're fine. And finally, the language. So the language can be identified in a number of different identifiers. There's a whole long list at this website here, but common ones are listed in a 3-letter sort of, as it says here, it's a code list. So it's a standardized way to describe every language in the world. Apart from English, we've got a few extra different options for English because there's different sort of strains of English. So international, proper British English is just identified with UK. American English would be US. ENG would be used if there's a single language which is intended for both the UK and the US. And in some documents, some teams work with a single InDesign document that has 2 layers, so there are 2 different languages within it, so that is identified with this UK-US. Okay, so that's that. Let's have a look what else. For special finishes and jackets, I'll show a demonstration of how those are created at the end. So you would use layers to identify those. But mainly the internal sections of the document, because Quarto is such a co-edition publisher. The common CMYK layer, as we've used for many years, is unchanged. That would be at the bottom of the artwork, and that layer contains everything which is common to all language editions. And then on top of that, the text layer. This is slightly different because of this from how we've done it before. So the text UK, for example, or text US, you're actually identifying the language that's used by the name of that text layer. So there's the name with the file, and also, the language is identified in the file name, and the language is also identified in the layer. Okay, not too hard. I hope. This one may be different. So text color. We've talked about this, and really there's no need to use text black any longer. It's not something that production or printers require. It's not something that does anything for designers or editors. It's just a hangover from, you know, older ways of working, perhaps in Quark, perhaps, you know, in the 80s and 90s. It was the only way, or the best way that we had to identify which parts of a book would be separated. The language layer, which could be changed. I say layer there. It's actually the text black was used as a way to identify before we had layers. But now we've got layers in Quark or in InDesign, as we're recommending that we use. Within InDesign, you just have the language layer, and that's what all you need to identify the text that is changing. So no more text black. We are actually replacing all text black with just the regular InDesign default color of black. So it's the one that's always in InDesign. It's the black swatch that's being used. Any tint of black can be used from 1 to 100%. And we're making sure that it's overprinting. So those are the sort of main differences for text, with a slight difference to the name of the layer that the text is on. Make sure that all the text is on that layer, and anything else, I mean, it's called the text layer usually, but it could contain lines, it could contain images, etc. Anything that's changing within each language is all on that text layer. So if I come back to my presentation slides, here we go. We've got consistent naming of our files and our layers. Another advantage which I can show is that GreenLight can actually push out common settings. So PDF settings, color settings, keyboard shortcuts, that sort of thing can all be pushed out and managed within GreenLight. So that helps everyone having the same settings. That's already done for everyone internally, and it's very easy to do for externals. I'll show you that when we get into it. And no more text black. So instead, for co-editions, the text is always on that correctly named language layer, always set to that default process black within InDesign, and everything on that text layer is always set to overprint. So Circular Software has helped sort of recommend and document what is required, and we've published it. The next challenge is to get everyone to actually know where it is and to understand it. So as well as that sort of PDF file creation policy, there's also this, which is a support site. So if we go to this link, and this is worth you going to circularsoftware.com/clients/Quarto, we'll actually get to a page all to do with GreenLight specifically for Quarto. So hopefully this video will be on this page soon, so by the time you've watched this video you might be seeing yourself on this video here. So it's got a lot of information, and if I just show you for perhaps there, that's a link back to the policy that we were just looking at. But this top one is what was just mentioned in the presentation slide there. So if I go to here, this is actually an online database, if you like, or probably a better way to call it is just a list of articles, which is just either some common sense, good practice stuff, a bit like pre-flighting. But the real strength, or one of the real strengths of GreenLight, is that you can have specific checks just for particular clients. So for Quarto, these are some of the things that we want to have set up. So let's say what are the layers that should be created, and just by clicking on one of these objects, it will take you to an information page. It takes a little moment to load. There we go. So it's saying these are the layers, as I've just been mentioning, the layering for the inside pages, mentioning of the languages that we use, etc. So that's sort of the same information, but it's in a split up bite-sized part. So that's all to do with this information is on a public site. You can search it, you can share it, but it's also going to be referenced by the GreenLight software. So I wanted to show you that. So all of the checks that are available are grouped into lists, so checklists. So say if you're in an internal page, either work in progress or the final files for an internal section, the checklists that will be used will be automatically activated by GreenLight based on the file naming. So the file naming is very important, and as long as you call your file PLC, then GreenLight will know, oh right, it's a jacket and therefore it needs 15mm bleed for that type of jacket, and it will switch on different checks. If you call it INT, then it'll say, right, for the internal section maybe it's 5mm bleed, and we're going to have different requirements in terms of you perhaps wouldn't expect a spot color, but if you do, that's okay, but that sort of thing. So different checklists are switched on as we go. So GreenLight doesn't help you decide what's required, but once you've got that, it helps you with everything else, getting people to know where the information is, and actually to check that the files that are being created are matching those requirements and that information. So how do you know if a file is in good shape? The GreenLight stamp is actually put on the file icon. So if there's an InDesign document, or maybe you've been supplied 100 InDesign documents, you can tell at a glance which ones are good to go, which ones may still have some issues. And once you're inside the InDesign document, as you'll see in a moment, you get this InDesign table which lists all of the checks and all of the results of those checks, as well as the timestamp and an identification of which of the checklists has been run at the bottom there. Okay, so we're ready for a live demo. Let's switch into InDesign. Close those. And I'm going to open up an InDesign document. Now, I'm going to also launch GreenLight. So GreenLight is a standalone application that it expects a Mac running InDesign. So InDesign CS6 or later can be used. And as you launch GreenLight, it goes and retrieves the latest set of checks. So there you go, it's just saying a little notification, retrieving Quarto's checklists. So it's very easy to customize and to make sure that everybody's on the right latest settings. Okay, so let's have a look. This document has already got this in there, and you can tell with it selected, you can see that it's been created on a certain date at a certain time. Let's just make a new one just by clicking that. So did you see when I launched GreenLight, GreenLight has its own little panel, so you can just place this somewhere out of the way, and just a click on there is actually going to run GreenLight and run those checks. So you can see that it's going through the document and identifying where any areas that need a bit of work. So this one, I didn't mention this when we're talking about the policy, but actually bleed is 5mm on outside. So let me just show you this. If I'm in InDesign and I switch to my type tool, which you can do just by a double click, can't you, on a text frame, just hovering there, can you see that? Just hovering about there, I'm going to click on that and click on the GreenLight button again. Because I've selected that row, GreenLight will actually spot that and give me more information. So it's saying about I'm saying sort of, what's the problem with this bit? And it says, well, the document bleed is not set to 5mm on outside edges only. If I click on more info, then I'm taken back to that nice support site that says, this is the bit that we're talking about. There's this particular check. Here's the more information about that check. And this may be different to how you might have worked before, but because we're sort of able now to be a little bit tighter on how we're setting up our files, really for facing pages, there's no need to have an inside bleed. You just get a 5mm strip of the wrong part of a different page when you output your PDFs. There's no need for that. So that's the fix. That's the information that I went to. So you know, I'm not going to show you an InDesign training session. I'm quite happy to do that another time, but I guess you know how to change your bleed. So there you go. That's how to do that one. I just took that off so it didn't change all of them, and I've changed the inside bleed to 0. If I select that again and run GreenLight, it will check, and if I'm okay, it will set that row to green. Otherwise, I could run the whole checklist again. So let's see what's the problem here. Oh, and by the way, if you just select on one of that is green, that's okay. You can still go and find out more information about what that particular one means. Links are not embedded. What does that mean? Here's some information about why we suggest that we don't have links embedded and how to change that. Okay. So this one, yeah, document name matches file naming. It is quite tricky the first time you get the hang of naming files. So there's a couple of things here. It says this internal section document, so it knows it's an internal section document because of that file name int, is named with a 3-figure page number that doesn't match the actual page number. So that's quite interesting because the file is called 102, but the page here is called 104. So if I change that, we're going to be okay. But that sometimes, you know, happens, doesn't it? The document may have moved, maybe another section has come in or something's happened, and the file name and the document are actually out of sync. And it's really the InDesign user who's the best person to know at the time what the right thing to do is. It's much better to find it and check it and fix it and move on here than, you know, a month down the line saying, hold on, we've got some discrepancy here. Who was working on this file? What's the right thing? It just takes out all of that confusion by getting to that problem as quick as possible. Let's see what else. So if I click on the GreenLight button here, it now says the document name does not match the Quarto file naming. So it says the text UK layer doesn't match the file name. Language identifier. Okay. So here we've got the language is US, but the layer is UK. So I'll just change that here because it's easy. But which is the right thing to do? I'm not sure, but you know, the InDesign user who created this file is the best person to know. So if I run GreenLight again this time, it always prompts you to say, because I've changed something in the document, I've changed the layer name, I've changed the page number, then it prompts you to save it. And you can see now it's run it again, and I've got now one issue left. So let's have a look at this one. So the text layer, so the text layer here, black and overprinting. If I select that, it'll have a look at all of the text, and it says here we've got something that says all objects on the text layer must use the black swatch and be set to overprint. Please check the rule below of the text selected. Okay, so let's have a look. Where's the rules? Paragraph rules. If we're using styles, then that's probably the best place to find this. So there you go. It's found that within this setting we are using black, but it's not set to overprint. I might use a shortcut here. I've got a shortcut which takes me back to this panel, which is very handy. The shortcuts will be set up for you if you do this option. So in GreenLight you can do this add Quarto settings to this Mac. If you run that one, then you'll get some keyboard shortcuts, and those keyboard shortcuts are Alt or Option G to run GreenLight, and Control Alt or Control Option G to go back to the panel, as I've just done there. So with that one selected, let me see if there's any more of these. So I just did the shortcut again of Alt G. There's that one. Okay. Paragraph rules. And what I'll show you on the next document, you could use find and change to do a lot of these global changes. Either use styles or there's some other ways to quickly change, you know, attributes of the text that it's picking up like this. Okay, one more. And this time you see that it's actually said all objects on the text layer, and it's taken me to a different part, and it's saying that there's a problem with the overprint. So again, I could do that with styles, or if you know the shortcut, shortcut of, where is it, window, output, attributes, this one here. So if I just tuck that over here, I'm going to make sure that that is set to overprint. So have I got everything right? Is this file as perfect as it could be? Let's go back and run this once more. Hooray! So you get a little notification when you've got the green light. There's no problems with this file. And that's something that could be run at the start of a job, or just as you're going through. Just it's there to help you make sure that some important things within this document are set correctly. There's a little bit more, because you may at some point, if I just do this one, I want to show you about the book info in the document. So we can't put everything in the file name, and neither I don't think we should, but there's some more information that you might want to refer to, such as the ISBN, the page size, the trim page size is actually, you see here, it's actually spotted what this information is, and it's checking against this entered information. And this information does need to be entered, only needs to be entered once. And it stays with the document, and you can, I'll show you in a moment, you can add book info across a whole folder of documents. So there's some selections here. What I just changed there was the status to say, okay, I've been working on this, and then now it's ready to sort of archive and to output. It's a final file. So if the status is changed to final files, that will actually make a difference to GreenLight as well. Also, I'll just mention here the settings that we've deployed using GreenLight. We've got these settings such as coated or uncoated paper that we can make this choice, and that helps prepare the PDFs in a consistent and the best way possible for consistent printing. So I've changed this to final files. If you don't know any of this information, then there's a database internally, or if you ask your production contact, they'll be able to help you with this information. So if I change that to final files, now when I run GreenLight, it's actually a longer checklist. So it's changed the checklist that I'm running, and actually it's finding some stuff here that it wasn't as important whilst the file was work in progress. So yeah, whilst you're working on something, you might have stuff that's on the pasteboard, and therefore we don't want to flag that up when it's not important. And also you might have different layers. Let's have a look at the layers here. So yes, we did need a text layer, but actually sometimes it's very useful to have a mixture of different layers to help whilst you're designing something. So, but now it's final files. Now's the time where we need to get these files in good shape. Let me just, so that's one thing. If I just, GreenLight again will help me. It'll say the notes layer is not recognized. So that's, again, you can have notes whilst you're work in progress, but at final file stage, it's time to get rid of those notes. Okay, so let's try that again. Yeah, and we're okay now. What about this one? All objects inside bleed. I know that you know perhaps what it is, but if you want more info, it'll go and take you to a document that tells you what bleed is, tells you what this check means. But it's nice that it takes you to the place in the document and says this selected object is outside of the bleed area. So I'm actually going to take that and go back here. And this is just there to help sort of lead me through. I could do that, or I could just, get rid of those and maybe zoom out. In InDesign, I don't know the best way that you work, but I might just take a little look from this sort of bird's eye view of the document. I think I've got them all. Have I got them all? How would I know if I've got them all? I simply run GreenLight. It's so easy. Here we go. Let's have a look. So I'm running GreenLight. I'm running the final files on this work in progress. Sorry, on this internal document. The final files check. And some of the checks that are final are mentioned here. So yes, now I've got the green light on a final set of checks in this final internal pages checklist, and we're done. GreenLight can help with the exporting of files. So if you do this sort of level of making sure your files are correct and consistent, then actually there's some real benefits of what you can do once you've got files in this good shape. So we could package our files. That's just a command to InDesign to package them in a consistent manner. I'm actually going to do this next one. We can actually create an output file for translators. So using GreenLight's menu export, I'm going to create translation files. And what that's going to do is actually take me to a folder. So it makes a folder if the folder's not there. Here's where it appears. So it's on your desktop, GreenLight export. So it's very easy really to control the output of files from within GreenLight, because we know we've got such good quality files coming in. So it's packaging it. It's actually created a translation set. So it's actually naming it as the translation set. So this isn't a work in progress or a file you should edit. This is really a file that goes out to translators. Oh, this is the one I've just made today. There we go. So you get the InDesign document. You also get an RDML document for earlier version users of InDesign. But this is better than normal RDML because there's no missing images. There's no grey boxes with RDML files that GreenLight creates, because we're in control of the images that go in there. There's also got a positional PDF, and so this is the document that's just been created. If I zoom in on this, you might actually see there's a change to the image. The image there has actually got a watermark on, and that's true of the InDesign document as well. If I open up the InDesign document or the RDML document, what you have is a watermarked trim page size image. The CMYK layer is gone. Everything has been flattened down, so it's a nice light file. It's actually embedded in the document, so it's a single JPEG that is the whole spread. So this is really good for translators because it's just the bits that they need. They need all of the editable text, right? But they don't need any of the links for the CMYK layer. Doing it this way, there's no missing links. If there are links on the text layer, yes, they get those, but they only get what they need and they get nothing that they don't need. So they get everything in this nice, light, portable, and let me just switch that off, file. There you go. So that's a set of translation files from a successfully greenlighted document. Let me show you another one. I'll close that one. So this one has got GreenLight on here. We've got some different sections. It's another internal because I think that's the most important. I will make a jacket in a little while. So this says text is not overset. So if I just select that, click on GreenLight or use the shortcut, it will take me to, it'll say there's overset text in the selected text frame. If I want to know what that means, then I can find out more info. Or if, as you probably know, just zoom in with InDesign, it's taking me to down at the bottom of page 11, it's found a little bit of overset text. Top tip for InDesign users here, use Apple Y, which is actually edit in story editor. That will pop open a live display of the text in a different place. So you can see here, if I edit this text, it's actually editing on the layout as well. So that's how I would do it. So Apple Y opens it up, Apple W will close, and we've fixed that. Is there any more? Let's have a look. I do my shortcut, which was Alt Control G, and then run that again, Alt G, and that's it. So it's not the end of the world to have overset text, but it's not really what we want. We don't want to have a part of a sentence that's, you know, been missed. If we come back to this later on and start to pull out the text for some reason, you know, should that be there? Should, you know, and this is another, sometimes people say, can GreenLight actually fix the document for me? And in some cases, I think that's a good idea. We could actually automatically fix things that we know you would never want to do. But in this case, we could fix all overset text just by removing all overset text. But no, this isn't really the right thing to do, is it? The right thing to do is to take you to it, explain what the problem is, and then let an experienced InDesign user fix the problem. Let's have a look at this next one. So, no spot colors. I'll do my shortcut and it's going to tell me information. It's going to say spot colors in this internal document. Now this is interesting. You can actually say at this point, this is okay. Maybe you should be using a cutter guide within your internals. So some of them have exceptions allowed. The other one is this one. You can have images. If there's an image that's under a certain resolution, you can actually say for this case, for this image on this page, it's okay. So we want GreenLight to be used in the real world. So as people are working with images, sometimes it's the only image you've got. You want to just say this one is okay. So that's an exception. So we could have an exception here, but actually for this, in this case, those spot colors do need to be changed. So I'm going to get rid of that cutter guide. And it's as easy as that if the cutter guide hasn't been used in the document. Or I could get rid of the text black. And this is one way to get rid of text black, is just to replace it with the process black, as I was mentioning earlier. That's pretty good, but I'm going to do it another way. So I'm going to cancel that and actually do it with a find. You can do a find and change. So that's in InDesign, edit, find and change. And you can say, what am I looking for? There's lots of things you can check. If I say throughout the whole document, I'm actually not interested what the words are. I'm interested in the formatting of the words. So just by clicking down here, I'm saying, what formatting am I looking for? I'm looking for anything that's got a color of text black. And I want to change it to a color of process black. And while I'm here, let's do that. I'm going to force it to overprint as well. So that's something you couldn't do just by throwing away the swatch and replacing it. But here I'm actually going to find it, replace it, and force it to overprint. So let's do that. That's quick. And now if I get rid of the text black swatch, there's no shall I replace it with something, because it's not being used anywhere. So that's fine. So I think I've got that one fixed. How do I tell? Select the row, click on GreenLight. Yes, I'm okay. So now we've got text layer is black and overprinting. So if I click on that one, so something on that text layer is either not black or it's not overprinting, or perhaps both. This is the longest check that you would have to do. So it's going to show me the result. Here it comes. I am recording this video on the hottest day of the year. It's a good job you can't see me. And my fans on my computer are going. Oh, so that one maybe that was to do with the text black then. So let me try this one. Text layer images are black and overprinting. All right, yes, this one is taking me straight to something, and it's giving me some information. The object on the text layer has a stroke that's not black or nothing, and I'll show you a reason why you might want to have stroke that's nothing, or even fill that's nothing on the text layer. Let me go into this one. So I'm back into InDesign, zoom in, that's just with a little Apple Plus. Let's have a look at the layer. So that item is actually on that text layer, and it's not supposed to be, is it? So that dragging that down, drag the little dot down, moves it down. So now I've got that separate from there. There we go. Back to here. Run the shortcut. One left. Text wraps only on text layer. So as you saw with the first demonstration, preparing a set of translation files actually takes away all of the CMYK layer and flattens it and makes it into a new image. So it's important that text wraps aren't part of that CMYK layer, and really text wraps should be something that can be edited by the translator or the editor. So having them on the text layer is the right place for them. So GreenLight will say where this problem is, and it tells me there, like, so the text wraps can only be used on text layers. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in. And that's what we're talking about, this little shape. And this is an example where you might want an object with no color and no fill. The only thing important about it is that it has text wrap. So moving that onto the text layer is the right thing to do here. Okay, oh, I'm just looking down here. I'm already on the final files checks. So I can tell that that's been set up in here. Remember this amend the book info, and this is where you can do it to a whole folder if you want to. But if I just nip into here to check, this has already been filled out in this case with the book code, with the correct ISBN, etc., and the fact that it was set to final files. So if I get the green light on this final files, I can do some more exporting if I want to, or hand it off to, you know, the next person who's working on these files in your workflow. The poor little laptop's fans are going. I suppose I'm recording a video and I'm uploading to Dropbox at the same time, so I'm just making excuses really for it to take a little moment. There we go. We've got it. We've got the green light on the final files, and that's it. So now I can use the export. Let's do this next one. Create print-ready PDFs. So because you've got files in such good shape, there's no, reason that we can't make PDFs. So you can choose the page range that you want to for exporting. In this case, I'm just going to do the whole book. Let's see how long that takes. So yes, I'm going to do all pages. It's going to take me again to that place on my desktop. Let me move that out of the way. So in the GreenLight export folder, inside the PDFs folder this time, there may be some that I've made earlier. So here we go. These are ones that are being made right now from the InDesign files that we've had checked. So you can see them dropping in there. It takes like 10 seconds to make a typical CMYK PDF. Right, I paused the video a little bit as it was churning through these PDFs. As you can see, it's made of these text PDFs as well, all within pretty quick time, but it's a little bit boring just watching PDFs drop into a folder. These are all the text PDFs. Again, they've been named really well. So the naming that's being used is just the stuff that's important. So the book code, the page number, and the layer for both the CMYK. And they're all single page PDFs. So exactly what the production and print suppliers would want. So that's really nice. You can export straight from GreenLight from your InDesign document as long as you've got that final files check on there. So let's carry on. I'm going to close this document now. And in GreenLight, there's one more thing I wanted to show on this demonstration, and that's all about jackets. So actually we can make a new jacket using GreenLight from a template. So if I do that one, that was the GreenLight menu, run jacket from template. And here we can input information. Let me just find the right sort of information for this jacket. We're going to want to do one for this file that was called School of Music. So again, this information can come from your production contact or the database that you use. We have the concept of work in progress or final for jackets as well. And then how big is this? So the trim page size. You just put in the trim page size, and the idea is that the template will be worked out using this information. So if you're doing a PLC or a paper jacket, like a typical jacket, or a paperback cover, etc. So there's lots of different types. Let's just make a PLC, as that was the one that was actually in this case, and had 13mm spine. You can enter the page count if you want to. That's not, you don't have to. And if you put in a flap on something that's not supposed to have a flap, like a PLC, it does a little bit of sense checking and says, actually, you can't have a flap on that one, but other ones you must have a flap, for example. And then you can identify the language that we're using and the type of paper, just like we were doing for the internal files too. There is this option for advanced options if you want to change the thickness of the board or the amount of turnaround for a particular type of cover, but in general, this is sort of information that's required. And as I click OK, it's going to create a new document of the right size, and prompt me to save it. So actually, if you paste at this point, that's a good tip, because it will actually give you a well-structured name. So I'm going to save that, and you can see here in this document, it's actually nicely made, the 13mm spine for me. It's added on the extra bit that it needs for a PLC for the overhang, and it's got these sort of markers, these notes on this notes layer. So those are non-printing, and you can remove those if you want to, or you can keep them there. And it's also, as you probably see here, it's given layers. So it's actually automatically added in all the different types of layer that you might want, and it all matches with the guidelines and that file creation policy, of course. So you've got spot colors with the same name as the layer that they're on. So we're still using spot colors for special finishes, for die lines and for foils, etc. Emboss, deboss, it's all in there. But there's also this one called special. So if you have got something that's not in this list of commonly used ones, like spot UV, you can still use special. Maybe glitter is an example. So special glitter, you would just use the word special and make a special glitter layer and make a swatch called special glitter, and then you carry on as normal. And the guidelines say that you use overprint for all of these objects. So these things will be set to overprint in this. And it's always easy to throw away things than to add in things and get all the spelling right, etc. So that's why they're in there. But if you don't want them, then of course you can just delete them, and that's fine. So, oh yeah, I was going to undo that as I show you this next bit. Also, under the Run menu, you can actually amend the spine. So if you go to this, it says what the information is that we've added, but maybe, you know, sometimes late in the day you actually need to change the spine. Did you see that? It actually changed that, and it changed the marker too. So what's actually happening here is we've got an InDesign spread. So this is actually a 3-page spread. It's got a thin second page, which is actually the spine. And if you had flaps, it would be a 5-page spread with the flap at either side being page 1 and 5 in that example. So that means that as you change the spine here, everything on the front page gets pushed over to the right, everything on the back page gets pushed over to the back, and it's just the spine that changes. So that nicely sort of helps with spine width changes late in the day, as I know often happens. If you've got stuff running across the spine, perhaps an image that goes all the way across the back and front cover, then you might need to do some manual tidying up. But we're doing our best in terms of making it easy to create and easy to amend these things. So if I close that one and show one I've made, here's an example of the cover that was made using this GreenLight template, and also run the GreenLight checks on it as well. So the naming of PLC means that it has a specific 15mm bleed in this case. Okay, one last thing is that when we export this, because we know where the front cover is, because we've used the template, then we can do this one, create front cover JPEG. That's really quick to make just the front cover as a JPEG. So it's named in the way that the marketing department requires. It's just the ISBN .jpg, and it's just information. It's just a JPEG that is 1000 pixels high and RGB. Just what we require. Very quick. So that's some good sort of demonstration of what GreenLight is. Let me just finish off by showing. Once we have our files in a complete, correct and consistent way, then we know that the files that we supply or are supplied to us are in good shape, which means we can have trouble-free exporting and proofing. We can run automated processes, and there's plenty more that we could do with our files now they're in this good shape. Much better for archiving and then pulling out of archive, being able to find the files that, and store them properly, and then move between different print suppliers late in the day, because we've got a central, complete, correct, consistent set of files. And that means that we're ready for whatever else we want to do with our files in the future that we maybe haven't thought of yet. So that's the overview and a demonstration of GreenLight. The web page, I'll just go to the web page just once more, is circular software /clients/Quarto. This is the page that has all the extra information, and you can download the current version of GreenLight from here. And if you're an outside worker, so a freelancer, etc., this document has all the information of how to run and set up, as I mentioned, deploying the settings, adding the Quarto settings to this Mac. And if you're outside, then you need to know that there's an ID number. So you need to copy your ID number and add it to a spreadsheet, and then we can make sure that you can use the Quarto version of GreenLight for free. So I hope you liked that demonstration. Thanks a lot. Thanks for watching.